The black sedan pulled up to the curb at exactly 7:45 in the morning, the same time it did every weekday for the past 11 years. Marcus Thornfield stepped out onto the sidewalk, his custom Italian shoes hitting the concrete with the confidence of a man who owned half the city's skyline. 2 bodyguards flanked him immediately, their eyes scanning the usual morning crowd. The coffee vendors, the rushed professionals, the delivery trucks unloading at the base of the Thornfield Tower. But there was something unusual that morning, something that would change everything, though Marcus did not know it yet. A girl stood near the revolving doors. She could not have been more than 12 years old, maybe 13. Thin frame, worn jacket 2 sizes too big, clutching something against her chest. A letter, it looked like. An envelope, yellowed at the edges, as if it had been opened and refolded many times. Marcus did not slow his stride. He had learned long ago not to make eye contact with anyone who positioned themselves near his building. They always wanted something. Money, a job, an investment in some ridiculous scheme, a lawsuit settlement, a piece of his empire. Everyone wanted a piece of Marcus Thornfield. The girl took a single step forward as he approached. One of the bodyguards immediately moved between them, a human wall of muscle and warning. She stopped, but she did not look away. Her eyes locked onto Marcus with an intensity that felt almost uncomfortable, as if she could see through the expensive suit and the cold expression he wore like armor. He swept past her without a word, through the revolving doors, into the marble lobby that smelled of wealth and exclusion. The doors sealed behind him with a soft whoosh, cutting off the outside world, cutting off the girl, cutting off whatever desperate story she had brought with her. Marcus did not think about her again until the elevator reached the 42nd floor and his assistant, Patricia, handed him his morning briefing. Patricia had been with him for 9 years, one of the few people he trusted, which meant he trusted her to do her job and nothing more. The morning passed in a blur of contracts and conference calls. A merger in Singapore, a lawsuit in Delaware, a hostile takeover bid he was orchestrating against a pharmaceutical company whose CEO had made the mistake of underestimating him 5 years ago. Marcus Thornfield did not forget slights, and he certainly did not forgive them. At noon, when he descended to street level for a lunch meeting across town, the girl was still there. Same spot, same worn jacket, same envelope pressed against her chest like a talisman. This time, Marcus felt a flicker of something, not concern exactly, more like irritation that someone had failed to remove an obstacle from his path. He gestured sharply to the head of his security detail. "Get rid of her." Single quotes. The man nodded, started toward the girl. Marcus climbed into the waiting car without looking back. Whatever sob story she had, whatever angle she was working, it was not his problem. He had not built a $12 billion empire by stopping to listen to every hard luck case that planted themselves outside his door. But when he returned 3 hours later, she was still there. The security team had moved her back, established a perimeter, made it clear she was not welcome. But she had not left. She stood across the street now, partially hidden behind a vendor cart, watching the building entrance with the patience of someone who had nowhere else to go and nothing but time. That evening, Marcus stayed late at the office. He often did. The penthouse apartment he owned across town felt more like a hotel than a home, and at least here, surrounded by his company's achievements, the awards on the walls, the deal trophies on the shelves, he felt something close to purpose. At 9:30, when he finally left for the night, he half expected the girl to be gone. Children had bedtimes, even street children, even whatever category this persistent little stalker fell into. But she was there, sitting on the steps of the building across the street now, illuminated by the harsh glow of a streetlight, still holding that damned envelope. She stood when she saw him emerge, took a step forward, then stopped, as if she knew the invisible boundary the security team had established. Marcus felt a spike of genuine anger then. Who had put her up to this? Which of his enemies? Which of his former business partners? Which scorned relative or rejected petitioner had sent a child to play on whatever shred of conscience they assumed he still possessed? He walked directly toward her, his security team moving to intercept, but he waved them back. He wanted to handle this himself, wanted to look this little manipulator in the eye and make it crystal clear that Marcus Thornfield was not a mark, not a target, not someone who could be moved by a staged performance and a pair of sad eyes. The girl straightened as he approached, clutching the envelope tighter. Up close, Marcus could see details he had missed from a distance. The dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. The way her jeans were held up with a belt cinched to the last hole and probably needed to go another 2 inches to fit properly. The scuff marks on shoes that had been cheap to begin with and were now falling apart. Professional costume work, Marcus thought cynically. Someone had dressed her for maximum sympathy. Who sent you? His voice came out harsh, sharp enough to make her flinch. Was it Richard Chun? The Vandermeer family? Some tabloid reporter looking for a story? The girl blinked at him, confusion crossing her face. I don't know those people. Then who? Who's paying you to stand outside my building? What's the angle here? Are you going to claim I'm your father? That I owe your family money? What's in the letter? A fake paternity test? A forged inheritance document? Her confusion deepened, and something else appeared behind it. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. Nobody sent me. I came by myself. Children don't just show up at billionaires' offices by themselves. Someone told you where to find me. Someone gave you a story to tell. Someone is using you as a pawn in whatever game they are playing. Marcus leaned down, making sure she felt the full force of his presence, his power, his absolute unwillingness to be manipulated. So I am going to ask you one more time. Who sent you, and what do they want? The girl's hands were shaking now, the envelope trembling between her fingers. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My mother sent me, but she's dead now, so I guess nobody sent me. I came because of what she wrote in this letter. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should find you. She said you knew her a long time ago, before I was born. She said your name was Marcus, and you worked in a big building downtown, and that you would remember her. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah Mitchell. He had not heard that name spoken aloud in over 15 years. Had not allowed himself to think about her in nearly as long. Sarah, with her bright laugh and her ridiculous optimism and her unshakable belief that people were fundamentally good, that the world could be kind if you just tried hard enough. Sarah, who he had met when they were both 22 years old and stupid enough to believe that love mattered more than money or status or the brutal mathematics of social class. Sarah, who had worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college while Marcus clawed his way up from a working-class neighborhood into an Ivy League scholarship. Sarah, who had believed in him when he had nothing but ambition and rage, and a desperate hunger to prove everyone wrong. Sarah, who he had walked away from 13 years ago without a backward glance, because she represented everything he had been and everything he had decided he needed to leave behind to become who he wanted to be. Marcus straightened abruptly, his face a mask. I don't know anyone by that name. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth, but he had gotten very good at swallowing ash over the years. The girl's face crumpled, but she said, she told me that you and her were, that you cared about each other once, that maybe if I needed help, if something happened to her, that you would. Your mother was mistaken. Marcus turned away, signaling his security team. I don't know her. I don't know you. and I don't appreciate being targeted by whatever scam you are running. If you are on this street tomorrow, I will have you arrested for harassment. Do you understand?" He did not wait for an answer. He strode to his car, climbed inside, closed the door on the sound of the girl's voice calling after him, something he could not quite make out, and refused to let himself try to hear. As the car pulled away from the curb, Marcus did not look back. He had spent 13 years not looking back, and he was not going to start now, because some girl showed up with a ghost's name on her lips, and a letter that could not possibly say anything he wanted to read. But that night, alone in his sterile penthouse apartment, staring out at the glittering cityscape he had conquered, Marcus could not stop thinking about Sarah Mitchell, about the last time he had seen her, standing in the tiny apartment they had shared for exactly 6 months, the happiest and most terrifying 6 months of his young life. About the way her face had looked when he told her he was leaving, that he had gotten an offer from a venture capital firm that would not hire someone with a girlfriend who worked as a waitress, that he needed to focus on his career, that she was holding him back, about how she had not cried, not yelled, had simply nodded and said she understood, that she hoped he found whatever it was he was looking for, that she would always remember the version of him that had existed before ambition had eaten everything else. He had told himself for 13 years that walking away had been the right choice, the necessary choice, the only choice if he wanted to build the empire he now commanded. He had told himself that Sarah had probably moved on, found someone better, someone who could give her the simple, honest life she had deserved. He had never once considered that she might have been pregnant when he left, that she might have had his child and decided not to tell him, knowing what his answer would have been. Marcus poured himself 3 fingers of scotch he did not taste and stood at the window until the sun came up, trying to convince himself that the girl was lying, that this was an elaborate con, that Sarah Mitchell had not sent her daughter to find the man who had abandoned her over a decade ago, trying to convince himself that he did not care either way. When Marcus arrived at his building the next morning, he was prepared for the girl to be gone. He had made his position clear, delivered his threat, established the boundary. Whatever game was being played, whoever was behind it, they would have realized by now that Marcus Thornfield could not be manipulated through sentiment or guilt. But she was there. Same spot across the street, same envelope, same patient, desperate eyes tracking his every movement. This time, Marcus did not approach her. He simply looked at the head of his security team and said, "Call the police. Have her removed and charged with trespassing and harassment. I want a restraining order filed by end of business today." Patricia looked up sharply from her tablet, something almost like protest crossing her professionally neutral face, but she said nothing. Marcus had never encouraged his staff to question his decisions, and they were smart enough not to start now. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Marcus watched from his office window, 42 floors up, as 2 officers approached the girl. From this height, they were tiny figures, barely distinguishable from the morning crowd. He watched the girl shake her head, watched her hold out the envelope as if it explained everything, watched one of the officers take her gently but firmly by the arm. She did not resist. She simply went limp, all the fight draining out of her in a way that reminded Marcus of a puppet with its strings cut. The officers had to practically carry her to the squad car, and just before they put her in the back seat, she looked up at the Thornfield Tower, up toward the top floors, where she could not possibly see him standing at the window. But Marcus felt seen anyway, felt exposed in a way he had not allowed himself to feel in over a decade. He turned from the window and returned to his desk, to the safety of contracts and numbers, and deals where emotion was a liability and sentiment was a weakness to be exploited. He had severed this connection years ago when he walked away from Sarah Mitchell. And he would not allow some child with a sad story and a dead mother's letter to resurrect what he had deliberately buried. But the girl did not stay buried. 3 days after the police incident, Patricia knocked on Marcus's office door with an unusual expression on her face, something between concern and carefully masked judgment. "There's a woman on line 3, Patricia said. "She says she's from Child Protective Services, and she needs to speak with you about a minor who was arrested near your building earlier this week." Marcus felt a cold twist in his gut. "Tell her I have no comment and to direct all inquiries to our legal department." "I did, sir." She said this isn't about a lawsuit. She said the girl, her name is Emma Mitchell, age 13. She's been placed in emergency foster care, and she keeps asking to speak with you. The caseworker thought you should know that Emma is refusing to cooperate with any placement or counseling until someone reads the letter her mother left. She's specifically asking for you to read it. "That's not my problem, sir." Patricia's voice took on a careful tone that Marcus recognized as her way of disagreeing without actually contradicting him. The caseworker mentioned that Emma has been refusing to eat. They're considering hospitalization if she doesn't start cooperating within the next 48 hours. She's just a child who lost her mother and thinks you're her only connection to the past. Then she's delusional, and she needs professional help that I am not qualified to provide. Marcus turned back to his computer screen. A clear dismissal. "Tell the caseworker that I cannot help her, and that they should stop using a traumatized child's fixation as an excuse to bother me." Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "I'll let her know." After she left, Marcus sat motionless at his desk, staring at the spreadsheet on his screen without seeing any of the numbers. Emma Mitchell. So the girl had a name now, a real name, not just the abstract concept of the girl that he had been using to keep her at a safe emotional distance. Emma Mitchell, daughter of Sarah Mitchell, a woman Marcus had loved more than he had ever loved anyone before or since, and then had systematically erased from his life because she represented everything his new world told him he should not want. Marcus pushed away from his desk and walked to the window, looking down at the street where Emma had stood day after day, waiting for him with the patience of someone who had no other options. The police had removed her, and he had assumed that would be the end of it. Problem solved, nuisance eliminated, life returning to the carefully controlled parameters he had established. But life had never been particularly good at staying within Marcus Thornfield's parameters, no matter how much money and power he accumulated to enforce them. His private line rang, the one only 3 people had access to, and Marcus felt another cold twist of premonition before he even picked up. Marcus Thornfield. Marcus. The voice on the other end was male, professionally neutral, faintly amused in a way that immediately set Marcus's teeth on edge. "It's been a long time. This is Detective James Park. We met about 8 years ago when you were dealing with that extortion case against your company," Marcus remembered. Park had been thorough, competent, and mercifully discreet about the details that could have damaged Marcus's reputation. "Detective Park, what can I do for you? I'm calling as a courtesy, not in any official capacity. I heard through the grapevine that you had a situation with a homeless girl harassing you outside your building last week, and that you pressed charges." "I did. The situation has been resolved, has it?" Park's tone suggested he knew something Marcus did not. "Because I made some calls after I heard your name attached to the case, and I found some interesting information about the girl in question. Emma Mitchell, 13 years old, orphaned 6 months ago when her mother, Sarah Mitchell, died of complications from pneumonia that went untreated too long because she couldn't afford a doctor and wouldn't go to a free clinic because she was afraid of losing custody of her daughter if anyone found out how sick she was." Marcus closed his eyes, something very much like pain moving through his chest. Sarah had always been stubborn about asking for help, always convinced she could handle everything herself, always terrified that showing any weakness would give the world an excuse to take away the things she loved. Park continued, his voice carefully neutral. Emma spent 3 weeks in temporary foster care before she ran away. That was 2 months ago. Since then, she's been living in youth shelters, when she could get a bed, on the streets, when she couldn't. According to the shelter staff, she had one possession she refused to let out of her sight, a letter from her mother in a sealed envelope. The staff assumed it was something sentimental, a last message, that kind of thing. But Emma kept saying she needed to deliver it to someone, that her mother had made her promise. Why are you telling me this? Because the charges you filed are going to stick, Marcus. The girl violated the restraining order 3 times in 2 days, kept trying to get close to your building, kept asking security guards to give you the letter. Right now, she's in juvenile detention. And given her history of running away and her lack of any stable guardian, the court is likely to keep her there until they can find a long-term placement, which, given how overburdened the system is, could be months, maybe longer. Again, Detective Park, why are you telling me this? There was a pause, and when Park spoke again, his professional neutrality had cracked just slightly. Because 8 years ago, when I was investigating the extortion case against your company, I did a deep background check on you. Part of that check involved interviewing people from your past, people who knew you before you became Marcus Thornfield the billionaire. And one of those people was a woman named Sarah Mitchell. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. You spoke with Sarah? I did. She wouldn't say much about your relationship, just that you had known each other a long time ago, that you had parted ways, that she wished you well. But there was something about the way she talked about you, Marcus. Like she understood exactly who you had become and why, and like she had forgiven you for it, even though you had never asked for forgiveness. It stuck with me. That conversation made me wonder what kind of person inspires that level of grace from someone they walked away from. Is there a point to this story, Detective? The point is that Sarah Mitchell's daughter is sitting in a juvenile detention cell right now, holding a letter that she believes will explain everything, and you're the only person she's asking for. Now, maybe she's delusional, like you seem to think. Maybe there's nothing in that letter, except the confused wishes of a dying woman. But maybe, just maybe, there's something in there that you need to know. Something that might change how you see this situation. My perspective on the situation is perfectly clear. A child was harassing me. I took legal action. The matter is closed. Is it? Park's voice was quiet now, almost gentle. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a scared kid who just lost her mother is trying to fulfill a promise. And the man she's trying to reach is doing everything in his power to avoid her. Which makes me wonder what you're so afraid of, Marcus. What could possibly be in that letter that scares Marcus Thornfield enough to have a 13-year-old girl arrested? Marcus ended the call without answering, his heart hammering in his chest with something that felt uncomfortably close to panic. He had not felt panic in years, had systematically eliminated every circumstance and person who could generate that kind of emotional response. Panic was for people who lacked control, who allowed their feelings to override their logic, who made decisions based on fear instead of calculated self-interest. But standing in his office, looking out at the city he had conquered, Marcus felt the edges of something he had buried a very long time ago starting to crack open. What if Emma was his daughter? What if Sarah had been pregnant when he left, had raised their child alone for 13 years, had died without ever telling him, had left her daughter with nothing but a letter and a promise to find a man who might not even remember her name? What if he had a child, and he had just had her arrested for the crime of trying to reach him? Marcus picked up his phone and dialed his attorney's personal line. Robert, I need you to do something for me, and I need it done quietly. Of course, Marcus. What do you need? There's a girl in juvenile detention, Emma Mitchell. I want the charges dropped, the restraining order vacated, and I want her placed in the best private facility available for kids in her situation. Money is no object. I want her comfortable, I want her safe, and I want regular reports on her well-being. There was a pause on the other end. Marcus, this is the girl who was harassing you. Are you sure about this? Just do it, Robert. Today. Understood. And Marcus, should I arrange for you to meet with her? I imagine she would want to thank you. No. The word came out sharper than Marcus intended. No meetings, no contact. I'm resolving a situation, not forming a relationship. Make sure she understands that the placement is contingent on her agreeing to leave me alone. Another pause. All right, Marcus. I'll handle it. After he hung up, Marcus told himself he was making the smart choice, the practical choice. He was removing a potential scandal, ensuring a child was cared for, and establishing clear boundaries, all at the same time. It was good business, good optics, and good sense. It had nothing to do with the image of Sarah dying alone and terrified, trying to make sure her daughter would have someone, anyone, to turn to when she was gone. It had nothing to do with the memory of Sarah's face the last time he saw her, the way she had looked at him with such sad understanding, as if she could already see the man he was about to become, and had decided to love him anyway, one last time. It had nothing to do with the possibility that somewhere in this city, a girl who might have his eyes, his stubborn chin, his capacity for fierce determination, was sitting in a cell and wondering why the man her mother had sent her to find wanted nothing to do with her. 3 days later, Patricia brought him the report. Emma Mitchell had been transferred to a private youth facility in Westchester, a place that cost more per month than most people's annual salary. She had her own room, access to counseling, tutors, everything she could possibly need. She had also refused to hand over the letter. According to the facility director, Emma kept it with her at all times, still sealed, still unread by anyone except Sarah Mitchell when she wrote it. When the counselors asked her why she did not just read it herself, Emma had said that her mother had told her it was meant for Marcus, that it had to be him who read it first, that this was important, that she had promised. There's something else, Patricia said, looking uncomfortable in a way that Marcus had rarely seen. The facility director mentioned that Emma asked if you would be visiting. When they explained that you had arranged her placement but would not be coming to see her, she stopped talking. She hasn't spoken a word to anyone in 2 days. They're concerned about her mental state. She's in the best facility in the state with access to trained professionals, Marcus said, keeping his voice flat and businesslike. They'll help her work through her grief and her fixation. Sir, she's not fixated on you. She's trying to keep a promise to her dying mother. There's a difference. Marcus looked up sharply. Patricia met his gaze without flinching, and in her eyes, Marcus saw something he rarely encountered any more honest disapproval. That's enough, Patricia. Is it? Because I've worked for you for 9 years, Marcus, and I've never seen you avoid something this aggressively, which makes me think that whatever is in that letter, whatever connection you had to this girl's mother, it matters to you a lot more than you're willing to admit. My personal history is not your concern. You're right. It isn't. But that child's welfare should be someone's concern. And right now, you're the only person she's asking for. You don't have to be her father or her guardian or anything permanent. You just have to be willing to spend an hour listening to what she came all this way to tell you. I have meetings all afternoon. Cancel them. Excuse me? Patricia straightened, and for a moment, Marcus saw the woman behind the professional assistant. A single mother who had raised 2 kids while working full-time and going to night school. The person who had depth and conviction that her job usually required her to hide. Cancel them, she repeated. Go to Westchester, read the letter, listen to what this girl has to say. You owe her that much. And if you won't do it for her, Do it for the woman you used to be, the one who apparently meant enough to Sarah Mitchell that she wanted her daughter to find you. That Marcus, the one who existed before you turned into this, he would have gone. He would have cared. So maybe just for one afternoon, you could try being that person again. Then she turned and walked out of his office, leaving Marcus alone with the weight of her words and the ghost of the man he used to be. The one who had believed that caring about people was strength, not weakness. That love was something worth fighting for, instead of something to be strategically eliminated. Marcus sat at his desk for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself beginning to crack in ways that terrified him more than any business rival or hostile takeover ever had. The drive to Westchester took 90 minutes through traffic that seemed specifically designed to give Marcus time to change his mind. He did not tell his driver where they were going, did not explain to Patricia why he had suddenly cleared his entire afternoon, did not rehearse what he would say when he finally came face to face with Emma Mitchell. The Riverside Youth Center sat on 20 acres of carefully landscaped grounds that looked more like a private boarding school than a facility for displaced children. Marcus had chosen it specifically for its discretion and its reputation. A place where wealthy families sent troubled teenagers who needed structure, without the stigma of traditional institutional care. The director met him at the main building, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of calm competence that Marcus recognized from years of evaluating executives. Her name was Dr. Helen Santos, and she shook his hand with a grip that was both professional and faintly assessing, as if she were trying to determine what kind of man would pay for a child's care but refuse to visit. Thornfield, thank you for coming. I know Emma will be relieved to see you. I'm not here for a reunion. Dia Santos, I'm here to read a letter and clear up whatever misunderstanding has led this girl to believe I'm someone important in her life, Doctor. Santos's expression flickered, something that might have been disappointment or might have been recognition. I see. Well, regardless of your intentions, I should prepare you for what you're about to see. Emma has been with us for 3 days, and in that time, she has barely eaten, hasn't engaged with any of our activities or counseling sessions, and spends most of her time in her room, staring at that letter. She's exhibiting signs of severe depression and what we call complicated grief, a grief response that becomes pathological when combined with trauma and loss. You're saying she needs professional help. I'm saying she needs something to hope for, Mr. Thornfield. Right now, that letter represents her last connection to her mother, and delivering it to you represents the last promise she made to a woman she loved desperately. Taking that away from her, or dismissing it as unimportant, could be psychologically devastating. Marcus felt a familiar flash of irritation. So what are you suggesting? That I pretend to care to make a troubled child feel better? I'm suggesting that you approach this situation with at least a minimal amount of empathy. Emma is not trying to manipulate you or extract something from you. She's trying to survive the unsurvivable, and you happen to be the lifeline her mother left her. The least you can do is treat that with respect. They walked through corridors that smelled of fresh paint and furniture polish, past common rooms where other kids watched television or played board games, past a library and a music room and all the amenities that money could buy to make institutionalization feel less like abandonment. Emma's room was at the end of a quiet hallway, a single with its own bathroom, and a window that looked out over gardens where early spring was just beginning to break through winter's grip. Dr. Santos knocked gently, then opened the door without waiting for an answer. The girl sat on the bed, her back against the wall, knees drawn up to her chest. She wore new clothes, jeans that actually fit, a sweater that looked warm and soft, shoes without holes. Someone had washed her hair, cut it, so it framed her face in a way that made her look younger and more vulnerable than she had on the street. But it was her eyes that hit Marcus hardest. They were Sarah's eyes, the same warm brown that had once looked at him like he hung the moon, like his dreams were important and his fears were valid, and his presence in the world mattered beyond what he could accomplish or acquire. Looking into those eyes felt like being punched in the chest by a ghost. Emma scrambled off the bed when she saw him, the letter clutched in both hands. "You came. I didn't think you would come. Everyone said you weren't going to come, but you did. You're here." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Marcus saw tears forming in those two familiar eyes. He forced himself to stay near the door, to maintain distance, to remember that this was a transaction, not a reunion, and certainly not the beginning of any kind of relationship. "I came to read the letter," he said, his voice flat and businesslike. "After that, I'll be leaving, and you need to understand that this facility is being provided as a kindness, not as the start of any ongoing connection between us. I did not know your mother well. Whatever she told you about me is likely exaggerated or misremembered, and I am not in a position to be part of your life going forward. Is that clear?" He watched something die in Emma's expression, hope extinguishing itself in real time. She nodded slowly, then held out the envelope with shaking hands. Marcus took it, careful not to let their fingers touch, and examined it for the first time. The envelope was cheap, the kind you bought in bulk at dollar stores. Sarah's handwriting on the front, still neat, despite the circumstances under which she must have written it, just said Marcus in blue ink that had faded slightly with time. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, covered on both sides with Sarah's careful script. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he unfolded it, a detail he hoped no one noticed, a crack in the armor he could not quite seal. The letter began simply, "Dear Marcus, if Emma is giving you this letter, it means I'm gone, and she needs you more than I ever let you know she would." Marcus read the rest in silence, aware of Emma and Dr. Santos watching him, aware of his own heartbeat loud in his ears, aware that every word on the page was destroying carefully constructed lies he had been telling himself for over a decade. Sarah's letter was not an accusation or a guilt trip or a demand for child support. It was something far more devastating than that. It was an explanation, a story, a truth that Marcus had never given her the chance to tell. Emma was not his biological daughter. Sarah had been 4 months pregnant when Marcus left, but not with his child. She had been assaulted by her manager at the restaurant where she worked, had been too ashamed and too terrified to tell Marcus, had been planning to terminate the pregnancy, but then had lost her job and her insurance in the same week, and had run out of time to make that choice. By the time she could have afforded the procedure again, she was too far along, and something had shifted in her. She had decided to have the baby, to raise her, to love her, despite the circumstances of her conception. She had named her Emma, after her grandmother, and she had never once regretted that choice. But being a single mother was harder than Sarah had anticipated, especially without family support or a college degree or any of the safety nets that kept people from falling through the cracks. She had worked multiple jobs, had struggled and sacrificed and fought to give Emma everything she deserved, had eventually gotten her GED and then an associate's degree while working full-time and raising a child alone. She had built a life, small but meaningful, and she had been proud of it. But she had also been sick for longer than she admitted to anyone, had been ignoring symptoms she could not afford to have diagnosed, had been pushing through exhaustion and pain because stopping meant not being able to pay rent or buy food or keep the lights on. By the time she finally went to a doctor, the pneumonia had progressed to the point where her lungs were compromised. Her immune system was shot, and her body was too worn down from years of stress and poverty to fight back effectively. The letter described Sarah's last weeks with clinical detachment, as if she were reporting on someone else's tragedy instead of her own death. She explained how she had made arrangements for Emma, had tried to find family members who might take her in, had eventually realized that there was no one, that Emma would end up in the system, alone and scared and convinced that she was as unwanted as her father had made her feel. That was why Sarah had given Emma the letter, had told her about Marcus, had sent her daughter to find a man who had walked away from her 13 years ago. Not because she thought Marcus owed her anything, not because she wanted money or support or any kind of reconciliation, but because she remembered the Marcus who had existed before ambition consumed him, the young man who had cared fiercely about injustice, who had been driven by a need to prove that where you came from did not determine where you could go, who had believed that success meant lifting others up instead of climbing over them. She had sent Emma to that Marcus, hoping he still existed somewhere under the billionaire's armor. She had sent her daughter to remind him who he used to be, to give him a chance to be that person again, even if just for one moment, even if just for one lost girl who needed someone to care whether she lived or died. The letter ended simply, "I'm not asking you to be her father, Marcus. I know that's not who you are anymore, and maybe it's not fair to ask you to be anything at all. But Emma is a good kid, a smart kid, a kid who deserves better than what the world has given her so far. If you can find it in yourself to help her, to make sure she doesn't fall through the cracks like I did, to give her even a fraction of the chance you fought so hard to give yourself, then maybe some part of the Marcus the first loved is still 12:09 p.m. in there. And if he is, then Emma will be the luckiest girl in the world, because that Marcus, the real one, was the best man I ever knew." Marcus folded the letter carefully, his hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. When he looked up, Emma was watching him with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral, but was really just desperate hope barely contained. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," Marcus said, his voice rougher than he intended. "She deserved better than what life gave her. She talked about you sometimes," Emma said quietly. "Not a lot, but sometimes. She said you were going to change the world, that you had the kind of mind that could solve impossible problems if you just had the chance. She was proud of you, I think. Even though you left, even though you didn't know about me, she was still proud that you became successful." Marcus felt something crack inside him. A fault line he had ignored for too many years, suddenly splitting open. "She shouldn't have been proud. I abandoned her when she needed me most. She said you didn't know. She said she never told you about what happened, about the manager, about me. She said it wasn't fair to ask you to fix her life when you were trying to build your own. That wasn't her decision to make. She should have told me. She should have given me the chance to help." Emma looked down at her hands. "Would you have helped? If she had told you, back then, would you have stayed?" It was the question Marcus had been avoiding since the moment Emma first appeared outside his building. The honest answer was probably no, that the 28-year-old Marcus Thornfield had been too consumed with his own ascent, too focused on proving himself, too terrified of anything that might slow him down or hold him back. But sitting in this room, looking at this child who existed because Sarah had chosen compassion over convenience, who had survived 13 years of poverty and struggle and loss because her mother had refused to give up, Marcus found he could not say that out loud. "I don't know," he said instead, which was as close to honesty as he could manage. "I'd like to think I would have, but the person I was then, I'm not sure he would have made the right choice. And now?" Emma's voice was so small, so careful, as if she were trying not to hope too hard for fear of being disappointed. "What about the person you are now?" "Doctor." Santos cleared her throat gently. "Irma, why don't you tell Mr. Thornfield what you wanted from him, what you were hoping for when you waited outside his building. Emma looked at Marcus, and in her eyes he saw Sarah's ghost, Sarah's grace, Sarah's impossible capacity for forgiveness. Mom said you knew what it was like to have nothing and want everything, to feel like the world was stacked against you and you had to fight twice as hard just to get half as far. She said you understood what it felt like to be invisible, to be the kind of person that successful people looked through instead of at. She was right about that. And you know what I want. I don't want your money, Mr. Thornfield. I don't want to live in your house or be your daughter or any of that. I just want to not be invisible anymore. I want someone to see me, just once, and think I'm worth fighting for. The way my mom fought for me every single day, even when it was killing her. The way she believed you would fight for me, if you just remembered what it felt like to need someone to believe in you. The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could hear Emma's breath catching in her throat, could hear the distant sound of other kids laughing somewhere else in the building. Kids who had not yet learned that the world was a place where mothers died and promises were broken, and men who were supposed to care just walked away. Marcus stood abruptly, needing space, needing air, needing to be anywhere but in this room with this girl who was asking for something that should have been simple but felt impossibly huge. I need time to think, he said, hating how inadequate the words sounded. I can't make any promises right now. He saw the light go out in Emma's eyes again, saw her fold into herself, saw her clutch the letter that he had handed back to her, as if it were the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under her feet. Dr. Santos walked him out, her expression carefully neutral, but her disappointment palpable. At the main entrance, she stopped and looked at him with the kind of directness that made Marcus deeply uncomfortable. That girl in there has lost everything, Mr. Thornfield. Her mother, her home, her entire sense of security and belonging. Right now, you represent the only connection she has to her past and the only hope she has for her future. I know you didn't ask for that responsibility, and I know it's not fair to put it on you. But life isn't fair, especially not for kids like Emma. So the question you need to ask yourself is what kind of man you want to be. The kind who walks away when things get complicated, or the kind who stays, even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, even when it requires you to be more than you thought you were capable of being. Marcus did not answer. He simply walked to his car, climbed in, and told his driver to take him back to the city, back to his office, back to the carefully controlled world where he understood the rules and knew how to win. But the drive back felt different somehow. The city that had seemed like his kingdom just a few hours ago now looked like a collection of buildings filled with people who were just as invisible to him as Emma had been when she first appeared outside Thornfield Tower. People working multiple jobs, people one medical emergency away from financial ruin, people fighting battles he never saw because he had insulated himself so thoroughly from anything that might require him to feel or care or acknowledge that his success had been built on luck as much as merit. Sarah had seen that in him, had known he would become this even when he was still young and idealistic enough to believe he would stay true to his roots. She had loved him anyway, had forgiven him anyway, had sent her daughter to him anyway, gambling that somewhere under the armor, the real Marcus still existed. Marcus did not know if she was right. He did not know of the person he had been at 22, the one who had believed that wealth should be used to lift people up. That success meant nothing if it was built on other people's suffering. That caring was strength, not weakness. If that person could be recovered, or if he had been permanently erased by 13 years of ruthless self-interest. But as he sat in traffic, watching the sun set over the city he had conquered, Marcus found himself thinking about Emma's question. What about the person you are now? What about the person he was now? Who had he become? And was it too late to become someone different? Someone better? Someone who Sarah Mitchell might have been proud to introduce to her daughter? Marcus did not have an answer. But for the first time in over a decade, he found himself desperately wanting to find one. Marcus did not return to the Riverside Youth Center immediately. Instead, he did what he always did when faced with a problem that required more than money or power to solve. He avoided it, buried himself in work, convinced himself that distance and time would provide clarity, or at least dull the uncomfortable emotions that Emma's plea had stirred up. For 2 weeks, he received regular reports from Dr. Santos about Emma's progress, or lack thereof. She was attending classes at the facility's school, participating in mandatory counseling sessions, eating enough to keep the staff from forcing medical intervention. But she was not thriving, not connecting with other kids, not showing any signs of the resilience that children were supposed to possess in the face of trauma. According to Dr. Santos, Emma had become a ghost, physically present but emotionally absent, going through the motions of recovery without actually recovering from anything. Patricia delivered these reports without comment, but Marcus could feel her judgment in the careful neutrality of her tone, in the way she made sure to mention specific details that she knew would land like small cuts. Emma asked if you were coming back. Dr. Santos told her you needed time. Emma said she understood that important people are always busy. The words important people landed with particular weight, a reminder that to Emma, Marcus represented the kind of success and power that made normal human connection seem impossible. He had become exactly what he had feared, becoming when he was young and hungry and fighting his way up. The kind of person who was too important to care about individual suffering, too elevated to see the people struggling below. On the 10th day after his visit to Riverside, Marcus received an unexpected call from Detective Park. Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Emma Mitchell ran away from the facility this morning. She left a note saying she was sorry for being a burden, that she understood you had more important things to worry about, and that she would figure things out on her own. Marcus felt ice flood his veins. Where is she now? We don't know. The facility reported her missing 4 hours ago, and we've been searching since then. We've checked the youth shelters, the places she stayed before you had her placed at Riverside, even the area around your building in case she went back there. Nothing so far. She's 13 years old, and it's March. Where could she possibly go? Kids like Emma get very good at disappearing, Marcus. They know which abandoned buildings have heat, which subway stations the police don't monitor closely, which neighborhoods will ignore a kid sleeping in a doorway. She survived 2 months on the streets before you had her arrested. She knows how to be invisible. Marcus thought about Emma's question, the one that had been haunting him for 2 weeks. I just want to not be invisible anymore. And now, because he had failed to give her what she asked for, because he had been too afraid or too selfish, or too damaged to offer even the smallest gesture of genuine connection, Emma had made herself invisible again, not because she wanted to, but because she had learned that being invisible was safer than hoping someone might actually see her. I want every resource available committed to finding her, Marcus said, his voice sharp with something that felt uncomfortably like panic. Private investigators, additional police support, whatever it takes. Money is not an object. Marcus, the police are already looking. Throwing money at this isn't going to. Then tell me what will. Tell me what I should be doing, because sitting here feeling helpless is not acceptable. There was a pause. Then Park's voice came back quieter, more thoughtful. You could look for her yourself. You're the person she was trying to reach, the one she believes might actually care. If Emma sees you searching for her, that might mean more than an army of professionals getting paid to find her. Marcus ended the call and sat motionless at his desk for exactly 30 seconds. Then he stood, grabbed his coat, and walked past Patricia without explanation. She looked up, surprise flashing across her face, but she did not try to stop him. Marcus spent the next 6 hours searching for Emma Mitchell. He drove to every shelter Detective Park had mentioned, showed Emma's photo to staff members who looked at him with suspicion and barely concealed contempt, walked through neighborhoods he had not set foot in since he left them behind decades ago. He checked abandoned buildings where homeless people clustered for warmth, asked rough men camped around barrel fires if they had seen a young girl, left his card with everyone he spoke to, and promised rewards for information. He searched subway stations and bus terminals, 24-hour diners, and fast food restaurants, where kids sometimes lingered for hours over a single cheap meal. Everywhere he went, Marcus was confronted with the invisible people, the ones he had trained himself not to see. The ones who existed in the margins of the city he thought he owned. People sleeping in doorways, begging on corners, pushing shopping carts full of their entire lives. People who were cold and hungry and desperate. People who had stories and histories and had once been someone's daughter or son or beloved child before the world had ground them down into anonymity. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, Marcus found himself in the same neighborhood where he had grown up, the place he had escaped through sheer force of will and refused to return to, even for family funerals or high school reunions. The buildings looked smaller than he remembered, more tired, more defeated. He stopped at a corner store where he had shoplifted candy as a kid, back when being hungry was normal and stealing was survival. The owner was different now. A young Korean woman who looked at him with the practiced wariness of someone who saw trouble coming from a mile away. "I'm looking for a girl," Marcus said, showing Emma's photo on his phone. 13 years old, dark hair, probably trying to stay warm somewhere. "Have you seen her?" The woman studied the photo, then studied Marcus, making calculations about whether he was a threat or an opportunity. "Are you police?" "No. I'm just someone who needs to find her before something bad happened." "Something bad already happened, mister." "Girl that age on the street alone in this neighborhood? She's already in trouble. You just don't know what kind yet." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "If you see her, will you call me? I'll pay for any information. I just need to know she's safe." The woman took his card, tucked it into her register, without making any promises. "Lot of people in this neighborhood could use help, mister. Why is this one girl so special?" "Because someone I cared about asked me to protect her, and I failed." Something shifted in the woman's expression, a flicker of understanding, or maybe recognition. "Try the old Thompson building, 3 blocks north. Squatters use it sometimes, and they don't bother kids if they keep quiet and stay out of sight." Marcus was moving before she finished speaking, his expensive shoes slipping on ice-slicked sidewalks as he half ran toward the address she had given. The Thompson building was a gutted shell of what had once been a factory, windows broken out, doors hanging off hinges. The kind of place that should have been condemned, but instead had become unofficial shelter for people with nowhere else to go. Marcus climbed through a ground floor window, calling Emma's name into the darkness, his voice echoing off concrete walls and empty spaces where machinery had once hummed. His phone's flashlight threw harsh shadows that made every shape look threatening, every sound like a potential danger. He found her on the 3rd floor, huddled in a corner with a thin blanket someone had left behind, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. She looked up when his flashlight found her, and Marcus saw absolute defeat in her expression, as if she had already given up hoping for rescue and was just waiting to see what fresh disaster would come next. She did not move, did not respond, just watched him approach with eyes that looked far older than 13, eyes that had seen too much and expected too little. Marcus knelt a few feet away, giving her space, trying to find words that would not sound empty or false. Everyone is looking for you. Dr. Santos, the police, half the private investigators in the city. You've had a lot of people very worried. I left a note. I said I was sorry. Being sorry doesn't make it okay to run away from someplace safe. It wasn't safe. Emma's voice was flat, drained of emotion. Everyone there was just doing their job, being nice, because they got paid to be nice. Nobody actually cared if I was there or not. Nobody saw me. I was still invisible, just invisible in a nicer place with better food. That's not true, isn't it? Emma looked at him directly, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made him deeply uncomfortable. A knowledge that was too mature, too bitter, too aware of exactly how the world worked. You paid to put me somewhere out of sight, so you wouldn't have to think about me anymore. You're a fixer, Mr. Thornfield. You threw money at a problem until it went away. That's what rich people do. That's what my mom knew you would do. Even when she was pretending to hope you might actually care. That's not what your mother said in her letter. My mother was dying and desperate. She would have said anything, believed anything, if it meant I wouldn't be alone. Emma pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. But I am alone. I've been alone since she got sick, maybe even before. And you throwing money at fancy facilities doesn't change that. Money doesn't make someone care. It just makes them feel better about not caring. Marcus felt something inside him crack wide open. All the defenses he had built over 13 years of ruthless self-preservation, suddenly inadequate against a 13-year-old girl's brutal honesty. You're right, he said quietly. I've been throwing money at this situation because it's easier than actually dealing with it. Easier than admitting that your mother's letter terrified me. Easier than facing the fact that I failed her when it mattered. And now I'm failing you too. Emma stared at him, surprise flashing across her face. I walked away from your mother because I was afraid, Marcus continued, the words coming faster now, as if confessing to Emma might somehow make it real, might somehow count as the penance he had never paid. Afraid that caring about her would slow me down. Afraid that her struggles would become my struggles. Afraid that if I stayed with someone from my old life, I would never be able to fully escape into my new one. So I left, and I told myself it was the smart choice, the necessary choice, the choice successful people make when they prioritize their goals over their feelings. Was it worth it? The question hung in the cold air between them, simple and devastating. I thought so. For a long time, I thought so. I built an empire, made billions, proved every person who doubted me wrong. I won by every metric I had set for myself. Marcus paused, looking around the abandoned building, feeling the weight of his expensive clothes and his privilege, and all the ways he had insulated himself from places and people like this. But then you showed up with your mother's letter, and suddenly winning didn't feel like enough. Suddenly, all I could think about was what I gave up to get here, and whether the person I became was worth the person I stopped being. Emma was silent for a long moment, processing his words. When she spoke, her voice was smaller, younger, the voice of a child instead of a survivor. Mom said you were the smartest person she ever met. She said you could solve any problem if you thought about it hard enough. Your mother gave me too much credit. Did she? Emma looked at him with something that might have been hope, or might have been a final test. A last chance to prove he was more than just another rich person who talked a good game, but never followed through. Because it seems to me like you solved every problem except the one that actually matters. What problem is that? How to be someone worth knowing. How to be the kind of person who doesn't need to buy their way out of uncomfortable situations. How to look at someone like me and see a person instead of a problem. Emma's voice cracked on the last word, and Marcus saw tears starting to form in her eyes. I don't want your money, Mr. Thornfield. I don't want some fancy facility where everyone is paid to pretend they care about me. I wanted you to read my mother's letter, and maybe, just maybe, decide that I was worth more than a wire transfer and a cleared conscience. I wanted you to see me the way my mom saw you, as someone who might be better than they seem. Marcus felt something break inside him, the last wall crumbling, the last defense shattering. He thought about Sarah's letter, about her faith in the person he used to be, about her desperate gamble that underneath the billionaire armor, that person still existed. He thought about all the years he had spent proving he was smart enough, ruthless enough, wealthy enough to matter. All the years he had mistaken winning for worth, mistaken success for significance. And he thought about Emma, this brave, broken girl who had survived loss and poverty and the kind of loneliness that should have destroyed her, still capable of hoping that someone, somewhere, might choose to see her as valuable for reasons that had nothing to do with obligation or guilt or image management. I see you, Emma. Marcus heard his voice crack, felt something hot and unfamiliar burning behind his eyes. I see you, and I'm sorry it took me this long. And I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to prove you were worth seeing. You shouldn't have had to wait outside my building for days. You shouldn't have had to get arrested just to get my attention. You shouldn't have had to run away from someplace safe just to make me realize that safety without connection is just another kind of prison. Emma stared at him, and Marcus watched as something shifted in her expression. Hope fighting with hurt, fear fighting with need. I can't be your father, Marcus continued, needing her to understand the boundaries, needing to be honest, even if honesty meant disappointing her. I can't replace your mother or give you back everything you lost, but I can be present. I can show up. I can be the person your mother believed I might still be if I just remembered how. What does that mean? It means no more hiding behind wire transfers and third-party reports. It means if you're willing to give me another chance, I'll do better than just paying for your care. I'll actually be part of your life, whatever that looks like. Regular visits, real conversations, showing up when things are hard instead of just throwing money at problems. Being someone you can count on, not because you manipulate me or guilt me into it, but because you matter. Because your mother trusted me with you, and I owe it to her memory to actually deserve that trust. Emma's face crumpled. All the strength she had been using to hold herself together, suddenly inadequate against the weight of someone actually offering what she needed. She started crying, harsh sobs that shook her thin frame, and without thinking Marcus moved closer and pulled her into a hug that was awkward and uncertain, and probably technically inappropriate, given their lack of established relationship, but also absolutely necessary. She clung to him like he was a life raft in a storm, her tears soaking through his expensive shirt, her whole body shaking with the force of emotions she had been holding back for far too long. And Marcus held her, this girl who was not his daughter, but was his responsibility, his chance at redemption, his connection to a part of himself he thought he had killed off years ago. I'm here, he said quietly, over and over, a promise and a prayer. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. I'm here. The drive back to the city was silent, except for the sound of the heater running full blast. Marcus had wrapped Emma in his coat, called Dr. Santos to let her know Emma was safe, and arranged for a car service to pick them up, since his driver had been sent home hours ago. Emma sat beside him in the back seat, exhausted and still shaking slightly from cold and emotional overload. Marcus did not know what to say, did not know how to navigate this new territory he had entered by making promises. He was not sure he knew how to keep, so he stayed quiet, and Emma seemed content with the silence, as if talking would break whatever fragile connection they had established in that abandoned building. It was only when they were halfway to Riverside that Emma spoke, her voice hoarse from crying. Mr. Thornfield, can I ask you something? Of course. And you can call me Marcus. Did you love my mom? When you were together, did you actually love her? Or was she just so inconvenient until someone better came along? A question was asked without accusation, simple curiosity mixed with a need to understand the past that had shaped her existence. Marcus thought about lying, about softening the truth to make himself look better. But Emma deserved honesty, especially now. I loved her more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. Your mother was the first person who made me believe I could be more than where I came from, that my dreams were valid, even if they seemed impossible. She supported me when I had nothing to offer her except ambition and anger at how unfair everything was. She believed in me when I barely believed in myself. Then why did you leave? Because I was a coward. The words came out harsh, self-condemning. Because loving her meant staying connected to the person I used to be, and I convinced myself that person was a liability. The venture capital firm that offered me my first real job, they made it clear that their partners came from certain backgrounds, moved in certain circles, married certain types of people. And Sarah, with her waitressing job and her community college classes and her complete lack of social connections, she didn't fit that mold. So you chose the job. I chose the future I thought I wanted over the present I actually loved. I told myself I would circle back someday, that I would find Sarah again once I was established and could offer her the kind of life she deserved. But by then, years had passed, and I had changed so much that the idea of reconnecting with her felt impossible. I had become someone she wouldn't recognize, someone she probably wouldn't even like. Emma was quiet, processing this. Then she said, she never got mad when she talked about you. She would just get sad, like she was remembering something beautiful that couldn't exist anymore. I used to think she was sad because you didn't love her enough. But maybe she was sad because she knew you loved her too much, and that scared you. The observation was so accurate, it hurt. Your mother understood me better than I understood myself. She understood a lot of things, like how to make rent when we didn't have enough money, how to make $3 meals feel like a feast, how to make me feel safe, even when we were one eviction notice away from being homeless. Emma's voice caught. She understood how to survive when everything was against her. I thought I learned that from her, but I guess I didn't learn it well enough, because the first time I was actually on my own, I fell apart. You didn't fall apart, Emma. You fought like hell to honor your mother's last wish. You tracked down a stranger based on stories from years ago. You waited for days outside his building, despite being ignored and dismissed. You held on to that letter, even when everyone told you to give up. That's not falling apart. That's extraordinary courage. It didn't feel courageous. It felt desperate. Sometimes those are the same thing. They arrived at Riverside just after midnight. Dr. Santos was waiting in her office, concern and relief warring on her face. She hugged Emma tightly, then fixed Marcus with a look that was both grateful and warning. We need to talk about next steps, Dr. Santos said, once Emma had been taken to the medical wing for a checkup. Emma can't stay here long term. This facility is designed for short-term crisis intervention, not permanent placement. We need to find her a more stable situation. What are the options? Foster care, most likely. There's a shortage of available homes, especially for teens. Emma might end up in group housing or bounced between temporary placements until she ages out of the system. Dr. Santos paused, choosing her words carefully. Unless someone steps forward as a guardian or sponsor, someone who can provide stability and support while she finishes growing up. Marcus felt the weight of what she was not quite asking. You think I should take her? I think you're the closest thing to family she has left, and I think she trusts you in a way she doesn't trust the system or strangers. But I also think that kind of commitment requires more than good intentions. It requires fundamental changes in how you live, how you prioritize your time, how you think about responsibility. A child Emma's age needs presence, not just financial support. She needs someone who shows up to school events and doctors' appointments and difficult conversations about grief and trauma. She needs someone who is willing to be imperfect and human and present, even when it's inconvenient. I don't know if I'm capable of that. Then you need to figure it out, because Emma's already lost one parent. She can't afford to lose another person who promised to be there for her. Marcus spent the rest of the night in Dr. Santus's office, going through paperwork and discussing options. He could become Emma's legal guardian, a process that would require background checks and home studies and court approval. He could act as a sponsor while she remained in foster care, providing financial support and regular contact without full legal responsibility. Or he could continue as he had been, paying for her care, but maintaining emotional distance, letting the system handle the day-to-day challenges while he observed from a safe remove. By the time the sun came up, Marcus still had not made a decision. He was sitting alone in the visitor's lounge, drinking terrible coffee from a machine, when Emma found him. She was wearing clean clothes the facility had provided, her hair still damp from a shower, looking more like a normal teenager than a street survivor. But her eyes were still too old, still carried too much knowledge about how hard the world could be. "Dr. Santos said you are still here. Don't you have work or something?" "I cleared my schedule for the day." Emma sat down across from him, studying his face with unnerving intensity. "Are you going to disappear again? Now that you've fulfilled your obligation and can tell yourself you tried? Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I don't know what you're doing." "I don't know if you do either." Marcus set down his coffee cup, meeting her gaze. "I'm trying to figure out how to be someone worth your mother's faith. I'm trying to decide if I'm capable of being the kind of person who doesn't just throw money at problems, who actually shows up and does the hard work of caring about another human being. And are you? Capable, I mean. I don't know. I haven't been that person in a very long time. Emma, I've spent 13 years building walls, cutting emotional ties, convincing myself that success meant not needing anyone and not being needed. Dismantling all of that, becoming someone different. It's terrifying, but you're thinking about it. That's more than most people would do. Thinking about it isn't enough." "No," Emma agreed softly. "But it's a start." They sat in silence for a while, two people who barely knew each other, trying to figure out if they could become something more than strangers, connected by a dead woman's hope. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Dr. Santos mentioned that I could become your legal guardian. That would mean you living with me. Me being responsible for your education and your medical care, and all the normal parent things that I have absolutely no experience with. It would mean completely restructuring my life, letting someone else's needs take priority over my schedule and my goals and my carefully controlled existence." Emma's expression flickered with hope, then flattened as she forced herself not to expect too much. "You don't have to do that. I know that's asking too much. Maybe it's not asking enough." Single quotes. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling like he was about to step off a cliff into unknown territory. "Maybe your mother knew exactly what she was doing when she sent you to find me. Maybe she knew that I needed you as much as you needed me. But I had become someone so isolated and so emotionally dead that it was going to take something drastic to wake me up. I'm not a charity case meant to fix your emotional problems. No, you're not. You're a person who deserves stability and support, and someone who actually gives a damn whether you're okay. And I'm a person who has spent over a decade running from anything that felt like genuine connection. Your mother is giving us both a chance to be better than we've been. Her sending you to me, it wasn't just about you finding help. It was about me finding purpose that means something beyond numbers in a bank account. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try. I want to go through the guardian process. I want to figure out what it means to have someone else in my life who matters more than my next deal, or my company's stock price. I want to prove to your mother's memory that she wasn't wrong about me, that the person she loved actually still exists somewhere under all the armor I've built." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "What if it doesn't work? What if I'm too broken, or you're too different from who you used to be? What if we try and fail, and I lose you too?" Marcus reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that felt foreign and natural at the same time. "Then we fail together, and we figure out what comes next. But at least we'll have tried. At least I'll have become someone who chose people over convenience, who valued connection over control. And that's more than I've been for a very long time. Mom would have liked this version of you. Yeah? Yeah? She always said the real Marcus, the one she fell in love with, he was someone who cared fiercely even when it hurt, who fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves, who believed that having power meant using it to protect people who had none. She said that person got buried under ambition and fear, but that he was still in there somewhere. I think she was right. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes, grief and regret, and something that might have been hope all tangled together. "I'm going to make mistakes, Emma. I'm going to screw this up in ways I can't even anticipate yet. I don't know how to be a parent or a guardian or whatever this relationship is supposed to look like. That's okay. I don't know how to be someone's daughter or ward or whatever either. We can figure it out together." They sat holding hands across the table while the facility woke up around them. Staff arriving for morning shifts, other kids heading to breakfast, the normal routines of institutional life continuing. But for Marcus and Emma, everything had shifted. They had found each other in that abandoned building, two broken people deciding to try being less broken together. It would not be easy. Marcus knew that the process of becoming Emma's guardian would involve legal complications and lifestyle changes, and confronting parts of himself he had been avoiding for years. He knew that parenting a traumatized 13-year-old would be harder than any business deal he had ever negotiated, that there would be setbacks and conflicts and moments when he doubted whether he was doing any good at all. But for the first time in over a decade, Marcus felt like he was making a choice that mattered beyond profit margins and power plays. He was choosing to be present, to be vulnerable, to be the kind of person who could be hurt by caring, but cared anyway. He was choosing to honor Sarah Mitchell's faith in him, to prove that the Marcus she had loved still existed somewhere, buried but not dead. He was choosing Emma. The next 6 months were harder than anything Marcus had anticipated, and he had anticipated them being difficult. The legal process of becoming Emma's guardian involved background checks that dug into every aspect of his life. Home studies where social workers evaluated whether his penthouse apartment was suitable for a teenager. Parenting classes that forced him to confront how little he knew about child development or trauma recovery. His staff was baffled by the sudden changes in his schedule, the afternoon meetings he canceled to attend Emma's therapy sessions, the business trips he postponed because she had a school play or needed help with a particularly difficult assignment. Patricia adjusted his calendar without comment, but Marcus sometimes caught her watching him with something that looked like approval, as if he had finally become the person she had always hoped he might be under all the ruthless business acumen. Emma moved into the penthouse on a gray Tuesday in late April. She arrived with 2 suitcases, 12:18 p.m. of belongings. Most of them new things Marcus had bought, because she had owned almost nothing when her mother died. He had converted his home office into her bedroom, had hired an interior designer to make it feel like a teenager's space instead of a sterile guest room, had even learned about things like fairy lights and poster hanging and the apparently crucial difference between beige and eggshell white for wall paint. The first night, Emma stood in the doorway of her new room looking overwhelmed. Marcus hovered nearby, uncertain whether he should say something profound or just leave her alone to process. "It's too much," Emma said finally. Marcus's heart sank. We can change anything you don't like. Different furniture, different colors. Just tell me, no. I mean, it's too much kindness. Too much effort. Too much everything. I don't know how to accept this without feeling like I owe you something impossible to repay. You don't owe me anything, Emma. Don't I? You've rearranged your entire life for me. Given up privacy and freedom, and probably a bunch of business opportunities because you're spending time with me instead of working 16-hour days. That's not nothing. That's everything, actually. Marcus sat down on the edge of her new bed, gesturing for her to join him. Can I tell you something your mother said to me once? This was years ago, back when we were together. I was working 3 jobs trying to save money for school, constantly stressed and exhausted, and convinced I was never doing enough. And Sarah said to me, Marcus, you need to learn the difference between a debt and a gift. A debt requires repayment, keeps you bound to the transaction, makes the relationship transactional. But a gift is freely given, no strings attached, just one person trying to make another person's life a little easier because they care. She told me that love was a gift, not a debt, and that I needed to learn how to receive it without immediately calculating what I owed in return. Did you learn that? I mean, not for a long time. I spent years treating every relationship like a transaction, every kindness like a debt to be repaid. It made me very successful in business and very isolated in life. Marcus looked around the room he had created for her, at the evidence of effort and care, in his desperate attempt to give this girl something that felt like home. You being here, Emma, this isn't me extending a loan that you need to pay back. This is me receiving a gift from your mother, a chance to be someone better, and trying to honor that by giving you a gift in return. A safe place to grieve and heal and become whoever you're supposed to be. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I miss her so much. Some days I can barely breathe from missing her. I know. Do you? You left her 13 years ago and apparently did fine without her. The accusation landed hard, as it was meant to. I did leave her, and I convinced myself I was fine. But Emma, I haven't been fine for a very long time. I've been successful and wealthy and powerful, but fine? No. I've been numb and isolated, and so disconnected from anything real that I forgot what it felt like to care about another human being. Your mother saw that coming, I think. She knew that I would sacrifice connection for achievement, that I would build an empire and call it a life. She still loved you anyway. Yes, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that, trying to be the person she believed I could be. Emma wiped her eyes, then looked at him with a directness that still caught him off guard. I'm going to be difficult sometimes. I'm going to have bad days where I'm angry at the world and take it out on you. I'm going to mess up and break rules and probably make you regret this decision. I know. And you're still willing to do this? Mom, I'm not doing this because I think it's going to be easy or because I expect you to be perfect. I'm doing this because your mother trusted me with the most important thing in her life. And I'm done walking away from things that matter just because they're hard. She nodded slowly, then surprised him by leaning against his shoulder, a tentative gesture of trust. Marcus put his arm around her carefully, as if she were something fragile that might break under too much pressure. They sat like that for a long time, two people who were still learning how to be family, still figuring out what they meant to each other. The weeks that followed established new rhythms. Marcus learned to cook breakfast, simple things like scrambled eggs and toast that often ended up burnt but were eaten anyway. Emma started at a new school, a private institution where Marcus's donation had ensured she got the support services she needed for her learning gaps and emotional challenges. There were bad days, of course. Days when Emma refused to get out of bed, trapped in grief that seemed to have no bottom. Days when she lashed out at Marcus for trivial things testing whether he would abandon her like everyone else once she became too much trouble. Days when Marcus snapped back, frustrated by his own inadequacy, terrified he was failing her in ways he could not see or fix. But there were good days too. Days when Emma laughed at his terrible jokes, when she showed him her schoolwork with genuine pride, when she called him by name instead of Mr. Thornfield, and it felt like progress. Days when they cooked dinner together, and it was a disaster, but they ordered pizza and called it close enough. Days when Marcus looked at this girl who had stumbled into his life and felt something he had forgotten was possible, a sense that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 3 months after Emma moved in, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his office. Detective Park showed up unannounced, was shown in by Patricia with a curious look, and sat down across from Marcus with an expression that was hard to read. "Marcus, I wanted to check in on how things were going with Emma. I heard you went through with the guardianship. That's admirable. It's necessary, not admirable. She needed someone, and I was the person her mother chose. Still, a lot of people in your position would have just written a check and walked away. You actually changed your life. I'm trying to... Some days I'm not sure I'm succeeding." Park smiled slightly. "The fact that you're questioning yourself means you're doing better than most. The worst parents are always the ones who think they've got it all figured out." He paused, then said, "I have something for you. A few weeks ago, I was going through some old files from when I interviewed Sarah Mitchell 13 years ago during that background check. I found something I thought you should have." He pulled out a photograph, worn and faded, showing a younger Marcus and Sarah at what looked like a street fair. They were laughing, arms around each other, looking at the camera with the kind of unself-conscious joy that seemed impossible now. Marcus barely recognized himself in the photo. That young man who smiled without calculation, who looked at Sarah like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Sarah gave me this when I interviewed her. She said she kept it as a reminder of who you really were, before life and ambition complicated everything. She said she hoped you would find your way back to that person someday." Park slid the photo across the desk. "I think she'd be happy to know she was right." Marcus picked up the photograph carefully, feeling the weight of history in his hands. "Can I ask you something, Detective? When you interviewed Sarah, did she seem happy? Did it seem like she had a good life despite everything?" Park considered the question thoughtfully. "She seemed like someone who had made peace with how things turned out. She talked about you with affection, not bitterness. She talked about Emma with fierce pride. She talked about her struggles honestly, but without self-pity. I remember thinking that she was one of the most genuinely content people I had ever interviewed, even though she had plenty of reasons to be angry or defeated." "That sounds like Sarah." She also said something that stuck with me. She said, "People think success means getting everything you want, but real success is wanting what you have, being grateful for it, and fighting to protect it." She had that, Marcus. Not wealth or status or any of the things you've accumulated, but she had something real. And now her daughter has a chance to build something real too, because you decided to be present for her. After Park left, Marcus sat alone in his office holding the photograph, remembering who he used to be and measuring it against who he had become. The young man in the photo would not recognize the billionaire in the corner office. But maybe, slowly, over months of learning to be present for Emma, of letting someone else's needs matter more than his own agenda, maybe that young man was starting to re-emerge. That evening, Marcus came home to find Emma doing homework at the dining table, her books and papers spread out in organized chaos. She looked up when he entered, and something had shifted in her expression. The wariness was still there, the self-protection that trauma had built into her bones. But there was also something else now. Comfort, maybe, or trust, or the beginning of belief that this situation might actually last. "How was school?" Marcus asked, hanging up his coat and setting down his briefcase. "It was okay. I got an A on my English essay, the one about resilience and coming-of-age narratives. I wrote about Mom." Her voice caught slightly on the word, but she pushed through. "The teacher said it was really powerful. Can I read it?" Emma hesitated, then nodded and pulled out a few typed pages from her folder. Marcus sat down at the table and read her words. This raw and honest account of losing her mother, of surviving on the streets, of finding the courage to track down a stranger because of a promise. The essay ended with a line that made Marcus's throat tight. "My mother taught me that resilience isn't about being strong enough to never break. It's about being brave enough to keep trying even after you've been shattered. She taught me that love is the choice to show up day after day, even when it's hard. And the man she sent me to find, the one who was supposed to help me survive after she was gone, he's teaching me the same thing. Not through words, but through action. Through showing up day after day, even when neither of us knows what we're doing." Marcus set down the pages carefully. "Emma, this is extraordinary. You think so? I know so. Your mother would be so proud of you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I hope so. I hope she can see me somehow, see us. I hope she knows I kept my promise, that I found you, and that you're actually everything she said you could be." "I'm not everything. Mom, I'm still figuring this out, still making mistakes. But you're trying. That's the point, isn't it? You're actually trying instead of just giving up or throwing money at the problem. You're learning to cook even though you're terrible at it. You're sitting through my school plays, even though they're probably boring to you. You're letting me be difficult and messy and broken, because that's what I am right now. And you're not running away from it." Marcus felt something crack open inside him, the last wall of defense crumbling. "Your mother chose well when she sent you to me. Not because I'm successful or wealthy or powerful, but because you needed someone who understood what it felt like to build yourself from nothing, to fight against the world's expectations, to survive when everything was stacked against you. And I needed someone who could remind me why any of that mattered in the first place. So we're helping each other?" "Yeah, kiddo, we're helping each other." Emma smiled. A genuine smile that transformed her face, made her look her age instead of decades older. Then she surprised him by standing up and hugging him, a real hug instead of the tentative contact they had been managing. Marcus hugged her back. This girl who was not his daughter, but was his responsibility, his connection to the past, his chance at redemption. He thought about Sarah Mitchell, about the woman who had loved him enough to forgive his absence, who had raised Emma with grace and determination despite impossible odds, who had sent her daughter to find him with faith that the real Marcus that existed somewhere. He hoped she was proud of what they were building. He hoped she could see that her faith had not been misplaced, that the Marcus she had loved was slowly returning, changed and aged and imperfect, but fundamentally still capable of caring, still capable of showing up, still capable of choosing people over profit. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus stood in his penthouse, looking out at the city that had once represented everything he wanted. The glittering lights, the towers he owned or had shares in, the visible proof of his success and power. It all looked different now, smaller somehow, less important, because he had learned what Sarah had tried to teach him 13 years ago, and what Emma had reinforced through her simple request. Being seen, being valued, being present, those were the things that actually mattered. Not the money or the status or the empire he had built, but the connections he formed, the promises he kept, the choice to show up day after day for someone who needed him. Marcus picked up his phone and looked at the photograph Detective Park had given him, at the young man he used to be, laughing with the woman who had seen his potential, even when he could not see it himself. "I'm getting there, Sarah," he said softly to the empty room, to the ghost of the woman he had loved and lost. "I'm becoming the person you believed I could be. It's slow, and I'm making mistakes, and some days I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm trying. For Emma, and for you, and for the version of myself that got buried under ambition. I'm trying." In her room down the hall, Emma was asleep, finally resting peacefully in a place that was starting to feel like home. She still had nightmares sometimes, still woke up reaching for a mother who was not there. But when that happened, Marcus was there instead, sitting on the edge of her bed until she fell back asleep, keeping watch over this girl who had saved him as much as he was saving her. They had both been invisible for too long, Emma to a world that did not care about orphans, and Marcus to himself, buried under layers of success that looked impressive but felt hollow. But they had found each other, had chosen to be seen, had decided that connection was worth the vulnerability and the fear and the constant possibility of loss. It was not the life Marcus had planned. It was better than that. It was real.